So there's quite a lot to catch up with in terms of Inside the Lords. Indeed, even though it's very close to Christmas and I'm wandering around with big sacks of presents and rushing around sending things in the post, I haven't actually got any time to relax because the Labour government are working us right until the end. Admirable, because you may say that we deserve to keep working, but actually partially a rather kind of petulant attempt at pushing bills through as quickly as possible, because I would say one thing, and I don't say this in any kind of sectarian longing for the days of the Tories, but this Labour government does not quite know how to govern and is making a mess of things. This is hardly an original thought. So let me go through a few things that have happened this week. One example is that there was a debate initiated on family farming. I think that this was genuinely an incredible experience to be at this debate, because probably for the first time since I've been in the Lords, there was a Labour front spokesman, the Minister from the Treasury, people across the House, crossbench, Lib Dem, Tories, independents like me, we all spoke against the attack on family farmers. And there was not one Labour Party backbencher in the room. So the minister was just sitting there on his own with a whip. Actually, I lied, because there was one Labour backbencher, but that was actually the president of the Countryside Alliance, the only Labour peer who has come out against the government on family farms. And it was significant because there was really some fantastic speeches during that debate. They were not written by anyone else. Everybody spoke very well, brought to the table lots of interesting new information about why family farms would be destroyed by the attacks on inheritance tax, but not just the inheritance tax issue, explaining that it wasn't going to affect the wealthy, the super rich, the Jeremy Clarksons of this world. Not to suggest that there's anything wrong with Jeremy Clarkson, but just was missed target, and that they've got the figures wrong. People didn't necessarily say this bitterly. They tried to appeal to the minister, and right at the end, the government minister stood there with no support whatsoever in the room and just read out, almost with a kind of a sort of passive aggressive, almost sneering tone, read out the ministerial the computer says no speech. Just showed no empathy whatsoever for farmers. In fact, said it was exaggerated, a moral panic almost around it. Anyway, infuriating. So you can see my speech below. Another thing that's happened at the Lords this week, and this I'm conscious of the fact that says that the Lords can be self-obsessed, anyone in Parliament in the Westminster bubble can be self-obsessed, was the second reading of the bill for abolishing the hereditary peers in the House of Lords. And it was a packed chamber. In fact, it was so packed that we had to start at 11 o'clock in the morning instead of the usual 2:30, and we were there till 11 o'clock at night. So it was like a long day discussing this because so many people wanted to speak. And the hereditary peers abolition is perfectly justifiable from the point of view of modern day world. How can anyone defend the hereditary principle? And I don't object to that. It is ridiculous to say that people should be legislators because of something that happened hundreds of years ago in their family, and then the peerage was passed down. We all know that. It's the cheapest shot known to man. But there's actually only 92 hereditary peers in the House of Lords. And indeed, when it was last discussed, when Tony Blair was first elected, there was a promise made that having abolished in general the spirit of hereditary peerages, 92 would remain if there was a certain democratic voting of those amongst hereditary peers and amongst the House of Lords, but that they would not be removed until there was a general overall reform of the second chamber. And they've obviously broken that promise. And they have, as a Labour government, only now focused on getting rid of the hereditary peers. And there's a lot of bitterness about that, because there's no justification for hereditary peers, but there is absolutely no justification for an unelected second chamber with all of the rest of us there, either because we're bishops or law lords or appointees, political appointees, put there by some Prime Minister because of something in which somebody arbitrarily, to a certain extent, decided we should be there. And one of the groups that really, I think you can say, is an affront to democracy are those people who were formerly MPs. They didn't get enough votes from the electorate to carry on being MPs, and were then put in the House of Lords, both parties by the way, and then turned into ministers or shadow ministers. I mean, what's democratic about that? So the hereditary principle is only one anti-democratic part of that second chamber. I argued for abolition. I just found the double standards utterly irritating. The government aren't going to back down. For them, it's a cheap win. They can abolish the hereditary peers, get rid of a load of people who, are not the biggest problem in the House of Lords by any count, and then say we're great reformers, we've created a historic way forward. It's really genuinely a shocking indictment of their lack of ambition, that the only thing they're going to reform is to get rid of, as it were, the most egregious, obvious examples of an anti-democratic part of the House, but not actually tackle the real problems. And by the way, this is from a government which every time you move has set up yet another consultation with more NGOs, more quangos, more power removed from the electorate than ever before, that only this week look to be saying that they're going to get rid of trial by juries because there's a problem in the criminal justice system and the courts having lots of cases pending. But they just say, oh, well, maybe we'll just have to have judges decide things without juries. I mean, that is one of the core tenets of a democracy. And that also has rumours is reorganising the council system to apparently streamline it. That could mean that they're considering, even the fact they're considering, cancelling or postponing council elections in May next year. I mean, they've got a nerve, right? So, there's a lot of attacks on democracy, and the hereditary peers are the least of it. My speech also, you can see below. Let me go on to what I seem to have been spending too many hours of my life on. And I'm doing this film now on Monday. I'm likely to be in the House of Lords till about 1 or 2 in the morning today. And again, we'll be doing the same on Wednesday. And why is that? I will be talking about football governance. And you do think, how did I get involved in having to be in the House of Lords for that long on a topic which you'd think wasn't exactly my subject? I just want to explain that the Football Governance Bill, which was initially brought in by the by the Conservative government when they were in power, was already overreached by the state, because what started to be a kind of light touch to ensure that some of the more openly exploitative antics of football owners, or the way that the Premier League might well exploit lower leagues, and some of the lower league clubs falling under, going under because of financial pressures, bad ownership and so on, has turned into one of those monstrous pieces of legislation with layer upon layer upon layer of powers that will be given to a super regulator with unprecedented powers to redistribute wealth from the Premier League downwards. I mean, then we'll have a licensing regime, which means that a state-appointed regulator will be able to remove the license of your football club if they breach any of the rules in this law. And the reason why I got involved is largely because the Labour Party made much, virtuous, self-regarding statements about how they were going to improve the bill by, for example, adding in a compulsory equality, diversity and inclusion part to reporting of the club. So that means the regulator, for example, could remove the licence of your club if you breach the EDI rules. And we all know that EDI is a divisive paper tiger, apart from anything else, because it's box ticking, but actually can lead to people exacerbating grievances, make people feel as though they're either the oppressor or a victim. And this is football, and we don't need it. And the rules of football, from UEFA's point of view, from international football's point of view, is that the state should not interfere in football. If so, you can be kicked out of all European matches, all European leagues, all European championships. And here we have this Labour government refusing to acknowledge the dangers of overreach, mission creep by a government into this regulator. So that's what I'll be discussing. Just finally, I wanted to just draw attention to the fact that there are absolutely strict rules about football and politics, and I have found the Taking the Knee, the Black Lives Matters movement, the rainbow laces, the movement of Stonewall into football to be deeply creepy and worrying and inappropriate. I'm glad to see that we've got a few rainbow refuseniks amongst players. I'm glad that football fans themselves are not tolerant very much of this nonsense that is a kind of politicised, woke, I don't like the word, football atmosphere. But there are sometimes moments of clarity that can be brought by football fans themselves, acknowledging that, you know, sometimes there is a political nod that you can give. And I wanted to just congratulate those Spurs fans who have campaigned and drawn attention to the last remaining British hostage held by Hamas in the terror tunnels in Gaza, Emily Damari. And I can't get over it. She's a mad Spurs fan. The Spurs fans have been drawing attention to her plight, but it's a grassroots thing. You know, they don't want it to be officially acknowledged. And I'd urge everyone, not just Spurs fans, to support her. I also was very impressed about the fact that her uncle, Robin, who is a Crystal Palace fan, also was very proud of the fact that Crystal Palace actually, after October the 7th, had put out a note in solidarity with those people who were killed on the infamous pogrom initiated by Hamas against Israel on that terrible day. And I thought that was quite a classy political statement that Crystal Palace management put out, and because Robin's one of their supporters, he's very keen to say that. And that's about it as politics goes. You know, maybe you will say one thing, but that would be it. And so I would say that we must continue to keep drawing attention to the plight of the hostages who have still not been released. And I think this matters because it does get forgotten too often. David Lammy, Keir Starmer, all prepared to say we want peace in the region, prepared to say it, but actually they have not made Emily Damari's name as well known as all of the kind of hostages over the years that have been held in prison. Terry Waite, when I was growing up, we all knew the name. We knew that he was in prison, he was a hostage. We all fought for him. We didn't know who he was, but that was the government did that. And that's the kind of thing. Emily Damari should be mentioned daily by a politician in this country. So even if I'm going to hijack the football governance bill to occasionally mention Emily Damari, I'm going to do it. I intend to do it today if I get a chance later on. I did it last week, and I hope that you will keep doing it. Mention it to your mates in the pub, make sure she's not forgotten. Not because she's a great Spurs football fan, but because she's a British citizen that's rotting in this hellhole and being kept by terrorists and shouldn't be there. And people will not talk about the hostages because it's become fashionable, very sadly, to just condemn Israel, to be anti-Zionist. Fine, if that's your particular political position, but never ever forget what happened on October the 7th led to those hostages being kept in the worst possible inhumane situations. And if you've been following the Syria situation, my final thought, and you say, oh my God, look at what Assad did with those people in those dungeons and those hellholes and those prisons, and oh my God, how could we have let that happen? Well, we know that the hostages have been kept in even worse conditions in Gaza, and they should be freed now. Bring them home.